Okay, we're back, everybody, on Open Line. Tim Wise joining us tonight to talk about critical race theory and educate us a little bit. We appreciate that. As I promised, we'll go right back to the phones. Welcome Joey to Open Line. Hi, Joey. Joey, there?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, go ahead. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I'm not going to ask a difficult question.
Okay.
When Desmond Tutu came to Barack Obama first inauguration, they said there was no way he could come here because somehow they did not have personnel to provide his security. But he decided to come on his own. And part of the pleasure coming by himself with no diplomatic status and all of that, he was away from the media so that nobody would ask him difficult questions. Because we as people, we have a tendency of asking people who have a platform like you difficult questions that we cannot answer ourselves. Just like many personalities that I see on TV, the ones that I don't observe, it don't look like they have any type of formal education, and yet they have written more books more than people like you.
Yeah. Because
if you observe what's happening now, is that the cookie, people forget that the cookie is crumbling. You know, you could look at the firm in Great Britain, you know, because even if when you cook some food, there's some food that you cook in a pot that will just like evaporate or like disappear like water. You will just, but some food are so acidic that they do not disappear. Instead, they spill over. And I believe right now we're having some of that stuff that has been cooking for all this time starting to spill over.
That's a good point. A good way of describing it. Joey, thank you for the call. We appreciate it very much. Let's continue and go to Jackie next. Hi, Jackie.
Hi.
What's on your mind?
Oh, what's on my mind? Okay. What's on my mind? I think it was outrageous, and I'm being honest. I'm a child of the 60s. Yeah, I participated in the sit-in, that they don't want history to be taught in school. If they don't want history of slavery to be taught, they don't even need to talk about the presidents or no one history because it's unfair. It's all a part of history. You have to talk about the bad history as well as the good history in order for us to have a conversation. Our kids need to know all the history.
Yeah, agreed. Absolutely.
And the only Republican that voted against that, and I applaud him, was Senator Wally Page.
Okay.
Now, what it says about our legislators. Do they like me because they don't like me because I'm black? Voting time is coming.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Jackie. Appreciate the call. I'll go ahead and let Tim comment on those, and we'll take more calls after this. Go ahead, Tim.
Well, I think the first of the two callers there had the metaphor of the pot of boiling food overflowing. I think is a good one. We have sort of kept the lid on the pot for hundreds of years, meaning we really haven't wanted to face this history. And Jackie makes a similar point in the sense that you have lawmakers who want to take out any history that doesn't hold us up as this, perfect or near perfect or on the way to perfection country. You cannot pick and choose. You have to take the good and the bad and look at all of it. And we don't do that. I grew up here in Nashville, and I went to school in Metro Public Schools. And growing up in the 70s and 80s, I was never even taught, even in the schools in this city, anything about the sit-in movement, anything about the Nashville movement, which was one of the seminal portions of the civil rights struggle. And I wasn't taught that. And many years later, when I was giving a orientation keynote speech at Tennessee State at the beginning of their school year, probably 6 or 7 years ago, I made that point. And afterward, there were students in that room, mostly black students who had also come through Nashville schools, who came up to me and said that even 30 years later, They were not learning that material in metro schools. They still were not being taught very much, if anything, about the sit-in movement. Why? Because if you learn about that, then you have to confront the reasons for it. And to understand the reasons for it, you have to acknowledge the deep-seated, embedded flaws in the American experiment. And if you do that, people will accuse you of being unpatriotic. And so this is where we are. If you don't, it's fascinating to me. We view ourselves as this amazingly special country, and yet other countries that have come out of systems of oppression have done a better job looking at their history. Germany has done so post-World War II. South Africa has done so post-apartheid. Rwanda has done so post the genocide that took place there in the 90s. And we're still sitting here telling stories about George Washington and a cherry tree and not being willing to look at the ugliness so that we can fix the legacy of that ugliness. It's those of us who want to fix that who truly love the country, right? Because we want the country to be in reality what we say it is on paper. And the ones who don't care about that are essentially saying, no, we've done as good as we can. We don't want to look at that anymore. So who really hates the country and who really loves it? It seems to me those of us who want to make the words meaningful are the ones who love it more.
Which brings us specifically to the question of should this be taught in Tennessee schools? And basically there's an effort all across the country, private schools, public school systems, where they're stepping back and reassessing. They're looking at data and they're looking at how can we do a better job? And it has become a political hot potato, because here's exactly what this article in the Washington Post said. Advocates see, where advocates see racial progress, opponents see an effort to shame white teachers and sometimes students for being part of an oppressive system. It says, but the equity work is critical, proponents say, to address systemic barriers holding back students of color and to create schools that are truly inclusive. So there's a lot of changes to curriculum, and I mean, this is taken to social media. People are up in arms all over the country. I mentioned Loudoun County, Virginia. This is happening in Idaho, all across the country.
Right. Well, I think it's interesting you mentioned Idaho. There's a great example of how absurd this attack on critical race theory is. In Idaho, there's a lawmaker who is angry that they are teaching the novel To Kill a Mockingbird, which is one of the central novels of the American literary canon. And it is a story that takes place in 1930s Alabama. And the people who are upset about it are screaming and yelling, my God, they're teaching our children that black people have been oppressed in America. Well, listen, if you can't even accept the argument that black people in 1933 in Alabama were oppressed, then you're not adult enough to enter this conversation. That shouldn't even be arguable. But that's how absurd this is. These are folks who don't want us to talk about racism at all. Not in history, not today, not in the future. They just want to wash their hands of it and cover their eyes and close their ears and put on noise-canceling headphones so they don't have to hear the parts of American reality that they're not comfortable with. But what these states are doing and what is attempted has nothing to do with critical race theory. The things that, first of all, no one is really advocating teaching true critical race theory in K-12 schools because it's a legal theory that is usually not discussed until law school. Now, should we talk about racism as a systemic force, which is certainly something critical race theorists believe in doing? Yes, we should, but that's not critical race theory itself. So when the legislature say we're going to ban critical race theory, the stuff they're banning isn't even critical race theory. What they're doing, and I'm looking at the list, I have it pulled up on my computer. The Tennessee bill says you're not allowed to teach that one race or sex is superior. Okay, that sounds great. The left doesn't believe that any race is superior. Critical race theory doesn't believe any race is superior. Interestingly, the only book I know of, the only scholarship that has made the argument about racial inferiority in the last 30 years was a book written by a prominent conservative named Charles Murray, who wrote The Bell Curve, which says that black people are biologically less intelligent than white people. And you know what? Conservatives who criticize critical race theory have never condemned Charles Murray. He is still a conservative activist and theorist in good standing. He speaks on college campuses. They defend Charles Murray. None of them condemn the bell curve, but they condemn those of us who want to talk about racism. The next thing the bill says, you can't teach that a person should receive adverse treatment due to race or sex. Okay, great. No one is advocating that we should teach that. You can't teach that the moral character is determined by race or sex. And literally no one argues that. So what the lawmakers have done is they have created a solution in search of a problem. There is nothing in this legislation that actually applies to what's being done in Tennessee schools or in Idaho schools or in Virginia schools. What we're talking about is an effort to shut down any analysis, any sociological or historical analysis that says racism is deeply embedded in America and has been from the start and continues to be a persistent problem. We can debate and discuss that, and we should, but you can't debate and discuss something that you don't allow to be spoken. And it's fascinating with the same people who yell about cancel culture and how the left is trying to cancel conservatives are literally trying to cancel an entire theoretical school of thought, and they don't see the contradiction. It's fascinating to me.
Wow, fascinating indeed. Take another break, everybody. More calls, more of Tim's thoughts right after this.